Hello, good evening. I'm Brett, and I'm your host for this evening. If, like me, you enjoy investigating spine-tingling stories and mysterious cold cases, diving deep into the most chilling unsolved murders, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Sunday Night Mystery. And tonight, we investigate another cold case from the files of Sunday Night Mystery. We also have books to accompany the show outlining all the details of our cases. Just visit Amazon and search Sunday Night Mystery. Tonight we explore the chilling depths of a case that has haunted Poole in Dorset for decades. This is the murder of Lilian Emily Maude Tharme, a brutal, unsolved crime that left a mother of four dead in the snow, discarded as if she were nothing. As we peel back the layers of this harrowing tale, we're left with more questions than answers. Who killed Lilian Tharme? Was it a stranger driven by a twisted desire, or was the killer someone closer to her than anyone dared imagine? The morning of January the 17th, 1960 dawned cold and still, a biting frost blanketing the streets of Poole, but the weather was the least of the worries on the minds of locals when the call went out. A body had been found. It was on Wheeler's Lane, a quiet road, often called Lover's Lane. It was here, in the bitter silence of the early morning, that a passerby made a horrific discovery. Among the snow, face down in the frozen mud, lay the naked body of 44-year-old Lilian Tharme. Her clothes were scattered over a large distance, creating an eerie trail of what had transpired. Her body was battered, bruised, and utterly exposed, as if someone had gone out of their way to almost dehumanize her, to strip her of everything that made her who she was. Not far from her body, a green Morris car lay abandoned in a ditch, its tyres buried in the snow, the engine cold. It had been reported stolen the night before from Talbot Avenue in Bournemouth, and it seemed to be linked to Lilian's death in some sickening yet deliberate way. The sense of disbelief was thick in the air. How had Lilian Tharme, a mother of four, ended up here, stripped of her clothing and discarded as if she were some nameless, faceless victim? The very thought sent ripples of unease throughout the small community. What was the story behind her death? Was this an act of passion, or something far darker? To understand the horror of what happened, we must first rewind to the night before, January the 16th, 1960. Lilian had attended a dance at a local Territorial Army drill hall. The event had been lively, with music and laughter filling the room, but the night would prove to be far from innocent. Lilian was a well-known and well-liked figure in Poole. Small and plump, she was the type of woman people gravitated towards, warm, cheerful, and always willing to lend a hand. Her husband, often her dance partner, had stayed home that night to look after their children, but Lilian, ever sociable, had attended the dance on her own. A man was seen with Lilian that night, a man she was known to have an acquaintance with. He was described as being between 40 and 50 years old, of average build with a ruddy complexion and a round face. Dressed in a brown suit and camel-hair coat, He seemed harmless enough, but there was something off about the interaction between him and Lilian. Witnesses later recalled a scene that had unfolded in the midst of the evening, a scene that would come to haunt them. There had been an argument, a heated exchange between Lilian and the man, whose identity was never fully confirmed. During the confrontation, Lilian dropped a key down the front of her dress. She was visibly upset and agitated, but no one could quite grasp the full extent of the disagreement. Perhaps it wasn't just the argument that unsettled her. It was the man's behaviour. Maybe he had been too persistent, too eager to take things further than she had intended. Or maybe it was something more sinister, an undercurrent of violence that had been simmering underneath the surface. Lilian, after the argument, fled the scene, leaving the hall in a rush. Her body language betrayed her. She was clearly disturbed, agitated, and as she stepped into the freezing night air, the weight of the world seemed to fall upon her shoulders. She wasn't just upset about the argument, she was filled with a profound sense of unease, as though something dark was lurking just around the corner. Her instinct, usually so sharp, had already begun to tell her that this night would end in horror. As Lilian made her way home, there was no comfort in the streets of Poole, no familiar faces to assure her that she was safe. She walked alone under the dim light of the street lamps, her footsteps muffled by the snow. Somewhere along the way, she encountered the dark green Morris 1000. The car was reported stolen, and the driver, a man who would remain a mystery for years, seemed to have no qualms about what would follow. What if he had been watching her? What if he had been waiting for the right moment? Was the encounter a planned opportunity, or had he simply seized the chance when he saw a vulnerable woman, already rattled from an argument, walking home alone in the cold? It's possible that he offered Lilian a ride, knowing full well that she was already at a disadvantage. The vulnerability of being alone on a dark road would have made the invitation difficult to refuse. Did she hesitate, torn between caution and the need for warmth, or did something inside her recognize the danger and refuse? Perhaps she rejected this offer. The thought of getting into a car with a stranger would have been too much. But rejection for someone like this man may have been seen as an insult, a provocation too great to ignore. In his twisted mind, was he owed something? And so the chase began. The Morris car followed her, gaining speed, cutting off her escape, and finally it struck her down. Lilian, already off balance with the impact, was thrown to the ground, her body twisted and broken. But the horror didn't end there. No. This was only the beginning. The car skidded to a stop, and the man, without a moment's hesitation, dragged her unconscious body into the vehicle. The violence was not just physical, it was psychological. She'd been beaten, broken, and now she was at his mercy. But the terror had only begun. The man didn't kill her outright. He wanted more. He wanted to break her spirit completely, to strip her of everything that made her Lilian. The evidence suggests that after the initial impact, Lilian was still alive, but the extent of her injuries combined with the freezing temperatures would have left her in a state of shock. The killer drove her to Waterworks Road, where, in the shadow of isolation, he carried out the next stage of his attack. The details of what happened in those moments remain largely speculative, but one can imagine the horror of being stripped of everything, of being made to feel small, worthless, as if someone's very humanity had been taken away. There, on the cold ground, in the dark of night, Lilian's life was torn apart in the most intimate, brutal way. Afterward, the killer disposed of her body as though she were nothing more than an object, cold, discarded and forgotten. He took her naked form and left her to die alone on Wheeler's Lane, exposed to the elements, her life extinguished in the snow, like a candle blown out by a passing wind. The pathologist's report would only confirm what everyone feared. Lilian had been alive when she was abandoned in the snow. The trauma to her body was extensive, bruises, abrasions and cuts from being dragged across gravel, but it was the exposure to the cold that had sealed her fate. In the grip of hypothermia, she slowly faded into unconsciousness, body shutting down as the temperatures plummeted. But it's the psychology of the killer that haunts us even now. What drives someone to carry out such a brutal act? To tear apart another human being in such a calculated, cruel way? Was this a man who'd always lived on the edge, his dark impulses simmering beneath the surface until that one fateful night? Or was he someone whose violence had been building, whose mental state had reached a point of no return? Whoever the killer was, they were driven by something deep and terrifying. What kind of person could commit such an act and then walk away as if nothing had happened? The psychology of this crime is as perplexing as it is disturbing, and though the case went cold, the questions it raised about the nature of evil lingered on, unanswered. The investigation following Lilian's death was exhaustive, but it yielded few answers. A young man seen walking near the crime scene never came forward. A strange figure described as having a fawn-coloured raincoat was never fully investigated. The man she'd argued with at the dance, was he connected to the crime, or was he just another figure in the shadow of an unspeakable tragedy? The more the police dug, the murkier the case became. Each new piece of evidence only seemed to lead to more dead ends. The investigation seemed doomed to fail, with every lead slipping through their fingers like sand. And yet even now, decades later, the questions remain. Who killed Lilian Tharme? Was it someone close to her, someone she'd known for years, or was it a stranger, a random act of violence born from the darkness of an unknown mind? The murder of Lilian Emily Maude Tharme remains unsolved. The case may be cold, but the psychological scars it left behind are as raw and vivid as the night she was murdered. As we step away from the haunting silence of Wheeler's Lane, Lover's Lane, one thing remains clear. The truth, it is out there. Whether we'll ever find it, whether we'll ever know what truly happened that night, is a mystery that may never be solved. If you have any information about tonight's or any of the cases that we feature, please contact your local authorities. Stay safe, and until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and keep unraveling the mysteries of our world. Because time, like a merciless predator, marches on, leaving behind shattered dreams and broken promises. Yet, amidst those shadows of despair, glimmers of hope remain. Join us next time as we delve into another chilling mystery that continues to confound investigators and haunt communities. Until then, stay vigilant and never forget those who've been lost to the shadows. Until next week, stay safe. Remember, the truth may be hidden, but as long as we keep the investigation alive, it's never truly lost. I'm Brett, and I'll see you next time on Sunday Night Mystery. But for now, stay curious, stay vigilant, and be sure to guard yourself against the darkness that surrounds us all. I'll see you next week on Sunday Night Mystery.